The day of my brother's wedding, I caught my husband and my future sister-in-law locked in a passionate embrace in a hidden storage room. But instead of falling apart right then and there, I joined forces with my brother to turn that day of celebration into a stage for unforgettable revelations, making them lose everything in a matter of hours. How could a groom betrayed by his own fiancée maintain such composure? My story may seem unbelievable to many, but it's the bitter raw truth I had to live through. It was a perfect spring afternoon. The historic mansion venue in Charleston, South Carolina, was decorated with cascading white orchids and delicate fairy lights. Elegant crystal centerpieces reflected the warm sunlight streaming through the tall windows, making everything shimmer like something out of a dream. Soft classical music filled the air as guests mingled with champagne glasses in hand. Today was the big day for my brother Ethan Holloway and my future sister-in-law Victoria Lane. As the groom's sister, Megan Holloway, I couldn't hide my happiness and pride. Standing near the grand staircase of the venue, I smiled, watching my brother in his perfectly tailored navy suit. His handsome face was radiant with joy. Ethan is 4 years older than me, and since we were kids, he's always been my protector. After our parents passed away in a tragic accident when I was just 16, he became everything to me. A father, a friend, my whole world. He worked 2 jobs to put me through college. He sacrificed his own dreams so I could have mine. Seeing that he had finally found happiness with a woman as beautiful and graceful as Victoria filled my heart with endless warmth. Victoria had an elegant, sophisticated appearance. She spoke with a gentle voice and always looked at my brother with such adoration. Throughout their year-long engagement, she treated me like a true sister. She took me shopping, called me for coffee dates, and always remembered to ask about my life. I thought our small family was finally complete and that I too had found my own happiness. My husband, Derek Mitchell, a successful real estate developer, stood by my side, his arm around my waist. In my eyes and everyone else's, he was the perfect man. We had been married for 4 years and had a relationship that was the envy of all our friends. He was always charming and attentive, the kind of husband who brought flowers for no reason and remembered every anniversary. He gently squeezed my hand and whispered in my ear, "Your brother looks so happy today." And Victoria is absolutely stunning. They're gonna have a beautiful life together. I smiled, leaning my head on his shoulder, feeling that familiar sense of security. "Yeah," I replied. "I hope they're as happy as we are." I sincerely believed I was the luckiest woman in the world. I had a brother who adored me, a wonderful husband, and soon a charming sister-in-law. I was living in that bubble of rose-colored happiness until just a few minutes later, I burst it with my own 2 hands. But I had no idea what was coming. The ceremony was about to begin. Suddenly, I realized my husband had disappeared a while ago. I wanted to take some family photos with the couple before they walked down the aisle. I looked around the crowded venue but didn't see his familiar figure anywhere. I thought maybe he'd stepped out to take a business call. Derek was always getting calls from clients, even on weekends. So I walked alone toward the back of the mansion, where the service areas and storage rooms were located. It was a quiet section away from the guests. As I got closer to one of the doors, I heard muffled whispers mixed with a woman's soft giggle. That voice was far too familiar. I slowed my steps, and my heart suddenly began to beat a little faster. Through the slightly open door of a storage room, I saw a scene that made my blood run cold. My husband, Derek, was there, and the woman he was holding in his arms, kissing her deeply, was none other than the bride of the day. Victoria Lane, my future sister-in-law. She still wore her pristine white wedding gown, but now she looked incredibly repugnant and hypocritical. Time seemed to stop. My ears went deaf. All sounds around me vanished, and I could only hear the sound of my heart shattering into a million pieces. I leaned heavily against the cold wall to keep from collapsing. A knot tightened in my throat, and a wave of nausea rose in my chest. And then their conversation reached my ears. Every word was like a sharp knife, ruthlessly stabbing the last piece of hope I had left. "You're so reckless, baby. Meeting here right now." Victoria's voice was flirtatious. Her hands were still wrapped around Derek's neck. Derek laughed, a laugh I'd never heard from him before. It was full of arrogance and disdain. "What are you worried about? Nobody would suspect a thing. Look at that fool's family, all busy running around like servants. And her brother, Ethan, He's nothing but a lovesick puppy. We've got everything under control. That fool referred to me. Lovesick puppy referred to my brother. I clenched my fists tight. My nails dug into my palms, but I didn't feel the pain. Still, I'm a little nervous, Victoria continued. What if everything gets exposed later? Besides, I don't love the idea of sharing you with your wife. Derek laughed again, this time with pure contempt. You don't have to be jealous of that girl. I only married her for the connections. Her family's reputation opened doors for me. She's nothing more than a stepping stone, a useful tool. As soon as I get full access to Ethan's business contracts through her, I'll find a way to divorce her. Soon all of the Holloway fortune will be ours. And then you can have whatever you want, my love. My love, those two words struck me like lightning. I couldn't take it anymore. My world, my beliefs, 4 years of love, 4 years of marriage, it had all been a lie. In an instant, I turned around and started walking like a zombie. I didn't know where I was going. Tears fell relentlessly, but I couldn't find the courage to cry out loud. I only felt disgust. A deep, profound disgust that made me want to tear my own skin off. What he said next changed everything. Stumbling along with my mind completely blank, I bumped into someone. Lifting my head, I saw a figure through my tear-blurred vision. It was my brother, the groom of the day, Ethan. Seeing my wretched state, he slightly furrowed his brow with concern. Megan, what is it? Did something happen? Are you okay? I couldn't hold back anymore. I wrapped my arms around him and burst into sobs. Through choked-back cries, I told him everything I had just seen and heard. Every horrible word, every disgusting moment. I expected him to fly into a rage, to run to that storage room and destroy everything, to call off the wedding immediately and throw Victoria out. But he just listened in silence, gently patting my back with his large hand. When I stopped crying, he gently pulled me away and looked me straight in the eyes. There was neither surprise nor anger on his face, only a terrifying calm. He carefully wiped away my tears, and then he did something unexpected. He winked at me, a significant gesture that only we as siblings understood from our childhood. He whispered a sentence in my ear that I will never forget in my life. It's okay, little sis. The main act is about to begin. Ethan's words hit my ears like a thunderbolt, leaving me so stunned I even forgot to cry. The main act. In such a critical situation when my dear brother was being betrayed on his wedding day by his fiancée and my husband. How could he say something like that with such calmness? My mind was in chaos. I thought maybe the shock had been so great that he had lost his mind. Seeing me still standing there dazed, Ethan said nothing more. He simply took my hand firmly and led me toward the end of the corridor where the groom's private suite was located. He looked around cautiously, and only after ensuring no one was present did he push me inside and lock the door behind us. The room was decorated with white ribbons and fresh flowers, but the air inside was heavy and tense, almost suffocating. Megan, listen to me closely. Ethan turned and looked me straight in the eyes. His expression was no longer one of terrifying calm. It was the seriousness and cold determination I only saw when he was negotiating million-dollar business deals. I already knew all of this, a long time ago. I froze once more, a long time ago. How was that possible? Ethan sighed and pulled up a chair for me to sit in. It was about 4 months ago, he began to recount. I started noticing something wasn't right. That woman, Victoria, showed excessive interest in the operations of Holloway Construction. She was always asking about contracts, projects, financial details, things a fiancé wouldn't normally care about. And your husband, Derek, acted with an abnormal familiarity toward her. Subtle eye exchanges, little touches. Things only someone looking closely would notice. I felt a knot in my chest. While I was blinded by happiness, my brother had silently detected the dangerous undercurrents. I had a bad feeling, he continued. So I secretly hired a private investigator, and what they discovered was much more terrible than I had imagined. He paused and looked at me with pain in his eyes. It wasn't simply infidelity, Megan. Behind everything was a meticulously calculated conspiracy. Ethan opened his phone and showed me several photos and documents. There were photos of Derek and Victoria on secret dates in hotels outside the city. There were also bank statements showing large sums of money transferred from an unidentified account to Victoria's personal account. And what horrified me the most was a detailed plan found in Derek's private email. The plan was organized in phases. First, Victoria would seduce my brother with her beauty and false sweetness to marry him and officially become part of our family. At the same time, Derek, as my husband, would use my trust to gradually access internal company information. Their ultimate goal was that after the wedding, Victoria would convince Ethan to let Derek handle some construction contracts. That way, they could conspire to divert company funds, create fake expenses, and eventually drain our family business. The business our parents had built from nothing. My blood ran cold. My 4 years of marriage, the love I had nurtured, had all been simply a move in their twisted game. Derek didn't love me. He had only used me as a pawn and a tool to carry out their dirty conspiracy. "So why?" I asked, looking up at my brother. My voice trembled. "Why did you go ahead with this wedding knowing everything?" Ethan looked at me and a sharp glint crossed his eyes. If I had broken off the engagement right away, we would have only caught 2 small fish, Derek and Victoria. But the one pulling the strings from the shadows would never have been revealed. Besides, we didn't have enough concrete evidence to expose the entire conspiracy. Not yet. My brother decided to turn the wedding itself into a trap. A grand stage where everyone could witness the performance together. "I have everything ready, Megan." Ethan squeezed my hand. "The company's important assets have been transferred to a secure trust account. The contracts they're interested in are just decoys, worthless paperwork, and I've installed hidden cameras and recording devices throughout this venue. We just have to wait for them to expose themselves in front of everyone." I looked at my brother, feeling pity and admiration at the same time. He had endured all this alone, planning and counterattacking, while I remained happily oblivious in my false rose-colored world. "Now I need you." Ethan's voice became more serious than ever. "Your appearance here, the fact that you discovered the truth at this moment, it's a variable they didn't expect, but it will become our ace in the hole. Derek and Victoria will only see you as a poor wife, heartbroken by the betrayal. They will never suspect you. Keep playing that role. Keep crying. Pretend to be utterly broken. The more miserable you look, the better you can perform. Can you do that for me?" I quickly wiped away my tears. The pain still burned in my chest, but it had now transformed into the flames of hatred. My brother was right. This was no time to be weak. I wasn't just crying over my husband's betrayal. I had to fight for the justice of our entire family, for our parents' memory. "I can do it." I nodded, my voice much firmer than before. Just then, there was a knock at the door. "Mr. Holloway, it's time for the ceremony to begin." It was the voice of the wedding coordinator. Ethan stood up and adjusted his tie. He looked at me and smiled, a smile full of confidence. "All right, little sister, let's go out. The show is about to start. Remember, you're not alone. Your brother is here. I've always got your back." My brother opened the door and we went out together. Reaching the main hall, we saw Derek and Victoria talking cheerfully with some guests near the entrance. Seeing Ethan and me approach, Derek quickly walked over with his usual look of concern. "Megan, where were you? I've been looking for you everywhere. Are you feeling okay? Your eyes look red." I looked up at him. My eyes were still puffy from crying. I said nothing, just shook my head and moved closer to my brother. Derek looked a little disconcerted by my coldness, but he probably thought it was just nerves or exhaustion. The music in the wedding hall suddenly became more solemn. The wedding coordinator announced in a powerful voice, "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The ceremony is about to begin. Let's welcome today's beautiful couple with warm applause." All the lights focused on the altar area, and all eyes were filled with admiration. And as my brother, the groom, took the hand of that woman, the woman who almost became my sister-in-law, to walk down the aisle, I smiled. My smile was probably the most perfect lie of my life, but it was also the smile that foreshadowed the storm to come. Under the dazzling lights, my brother and Victoria looked like a picture-perfect couple. Ethan still wore a happy smile, but I knew it was just part of a flawless performance. Victoria pretended to be shy and sweet, occasionally casting him loving glances. She was an exceptional actress, I'll give her that. They walked together down an aisle covered in rose petals amid the incessant applause of over 200 guests. I sat in the front row of the family section with Derek beside me. He still had his arm around my shoulders, whispering sweet words to me now and then. Aren't they gorgeous together? I hope we renew our vows someday with a ceremony this grand. I simply leaned on his shoulder in silence, pretending to be swept away by the romantic atmosphere. But in reality, I struggled to suppress the nausea rising in my throat. Every word and action of his now felt disgusting. His hand on my shoulder, the same hand that once caressed me tenderly, was the very one that had embraced another woman just minutes earlier. The ceremony proceeded according to the usual protocol. The officiant, with his warm voice, praised their love story and the beautiful union of two souls. Hearing it, I almost burst out laughing. Love? What love? A love woven with conspiracies and calculations and betrayal. But I had no idea what was about to happen next. After the empty speeches and readings, the moment for exchanging rings finally arrived. A cute little ring bearer in a tiny tuxedo climbed onto the platform with the wedding bands on a white satin pillow. Ethan and Victoria looked at each other, ready to exchange their symbols of eternal love. Hold on just one moment. Suddenly, a voice from the audience broke the sacred moment. The entire hall held its breath, and all eyes turned toward the person who had just spoken. It was a middle-aged woman. Her attire was quite elegant, expensive even, but her face was filled with anger and pain. She was accompanied by an older man, probably her husband. I saw Victoria on the platform flinch slightly. Her face went pale for just an instant. My brother remained calm, as if he had anticipated this woman's appearance. "Excuse me, who are you? What is happening?" The officiant tried to control the situation. The woman didn't reply. She walked straight onto the platform and planted herself right in front of Victoria. "Victoria Lane, do you recognize me?" Her voice was mixed with anger and bitter disappointment. Victoria took a step back. Her face was so pale it was devoid of all color. "Mrs. Bradley, how are you here?" "Why shouldn't I be here?" The woman scoffed bitterly. "I came to see how my son's fiancée, the one who swore eternal love to him, is about to become another man's wife. I came to seek justice for my son, Tyler." A murmur began to spread among the guests. Son's fiancée? What was going on here? Derek, sitting next to me, was also visibly surprised. "What's happening, Megan? Who is that woman?" he asked me in a whisper. I just shook my head, pretending to be equally surprised and confused. The woman turned to the guests and raised her voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for interrupting this happy occasion, but there is something I must say. This young woman standing here was engaged to my son Tyler Bradley for 3 years. They celebrated their engagement. They were planning their wedding. But in just a few months, she changed her mind and ran off with a richer man, leaving my son completely devastated." She pulled a bundle of photos from her purse and tossed them onto the platform. Photos of Victoria with another man in affectionate poses scattered across the white aisle runner, along with pictures from her engagement party. A collective gasp echoed throughout the hall. Now all eyes on the bride were no longer filled with admiration. They were filled with curiosity, doubt, and reproach. Victoria stood frozen on the platform, her face white as paper. She tried to explain, stammering, "No, that's not right. That person and I, we broke up a long time ago. It was over. We ended things mutually." "What nerve, now you lie in front of everyone," the woman scoffed again. "Just 2 months ago, you borrowed money from my son. You told him you needed it for medical bills. You deceived him and used him. How can you betray him like this now? How can you stand there in a white dress pretending to be innocent?" Victoria couldn't say anything more. She looked at Ethan with pleading eyes. But my brother, the groom, the one who should be the angriest, simply crossed his arms and looked at her with an unfamiliar coldness and distance. I, sitting in the front row, watched the performance in silence. I knew this was the first act my brother had prepared. He had tracked down the ex-fiancée abandoned by Victoria and had invited his mother here. He wanted to rip off Victoria's mask of innocence and purity in front of everyone. Seeing the situation spinning completely out of her control, Victoria suddenly clutched her chest, swayed dramatically, and collapsed on the platform, pretending to faint. "Oh my goodness, the bride has fainted," some guests cried out in concern. Victoria's hired bridesmaids rushed onto the platform, creating a chaotic scene. People were gasping and murmuring. In the midst of everything, Ethan slowly approached and looked down at the fainted Victoria. He showed no concern whatsoever. Instead, he flashed a slight smile. He took the microphone from the stunned officiant. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice rang out firm and clear, instantly silencing all the noise. "I apologize for showing you such an unpleasant scene, but I believe the truth must always come to light." He looked at Victoria, who I noticed was peeking at the reaction of the crowd through barely open eyelids. "You act very well, Miss Lane, but I think it's time to end this little performance." His words were like a bucket of cold water for everyone. Victoria, surprised by his directness, quickly closed her eyes tighter, but it was already too late. Everyone had seen her peeking. "And to make this show even more interesting," Ethan continued with terrifying calmness, "I would like to invite another special guest onto the stage, someone who is very much connected to this deception." He looked toward where Derek and I were sitting, and my heart began to beat faster. I knew it was our turn now. The spotlight suddenly pointed directly at Derek and me, making us the center of all attention. Hundreds of pairs of curious and surprised eyes focused on the family section. Derek was stunned, not understanding what was happening. He turned to me and whispered confusedly, "Who is your brother calling? What special guest? What is going on, Megan?" I didn't answer. I just looked at him with eyes full of tears, wearing an innocent, helpless expression. I knew it was my turn to act. On the platform, Ethan continued, raising his voice. This time, he addressed my husband directly. "The person I want to invite is none other than my brother-in-law, the real estate developer, Derek Mitchell. Would you please come up here and share in this celebration with us?" This sudden invitation caused even more commotion in the hall. People didn't understand why the groom was calling his brother-in-law onto the platform at such a delicate moment. What could Derek possibly have to do with any of this? Derek was completely paralyzed. He looked at me, then at the platform, and his face went pale. He probably started sensing that something was terribly, terribly wrong. But given the public invitation from his brother-in-law and the gaze of hundreds of people, he couldn't refuse without looking guilty. "Go on up, honey," I said softly, giving him a gentle push on the back. In an innocent tone, I added, "Maybe Ethan wants you to share some marriage advice with everyone." My words were like a needle prick, just enough to make Derek flinch. He swallowed hard and, forcing a smile, slowly stood up and walked toward the platform. Each of his steps seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. When Derek got onto the platform, Ethan affectionately put an arm around his shoulders and addressed the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, don't you think my brother-in-law is handsome and successful? I'm very proud to have a brother-in-law like him. Not only is he a talented businessman, but also supposedly a wonderful husband who deeply loves my sister." Ethan's praise confused Derek even more. He could only smile awkwardly without saying anything. His forehead was starting to glisten with sweat. "And perhaps," Ethan continued, his voice suddenly becoming significant and cold, "he's so charming that not only does my sister love him, but other women love him too. Isn't that right, my dear bride?" Ethan turned toward Victoria, who was still sprawled on the floor, pretending to be unconscious. But hearing this, I saw her eyelids slightly tremble with fear. Derek's face was now white as paper. He started sweating profusely and tried to slip out of Ethan's grasp. "Brother-in-law, what are you talking about? Everyone is misunderstanding. This is crazy." "Misunderstanding?" Ethan burst out laughing, a laugh devoid of any warmth. "Well then, let me show everyone exactly what the misunderstanding is." He signaled the AV technician at the back of the room. The two enormous projection screens on either side of the platform, which had originally shown romantic photos of the couple, suddenly went dark, and then flickered back on. But this time, the image that appeared was not of roses or champagne toasts or loving embraces. It was a video, recorded from a hidden angle in that storage room. The whole hall held its breath. The scene that I myself had witnessed barely an hour earlier unfolded vividly before the eyes of over 200 people. My husband, Derek, passionately embracing and kissing the bride, Victoria. She was in her immaculate white wedding gown. His hands were all over her. The sound was also recorded with devastating clarity. Every one of their disgusting words echoed throughout the hall for everyone to hear. Look at that fool's family, all busy running around like servants. He's nothing but a lovesick puppy. I only married her for the connections. She's nothing more than a stepping stone. The entire hall seemed to explode. Gasps, cries of shock. Insults and looks of contempt fell ruthlessly upon the two people standing on the platform. The sordid drama of adultery and betrayal was being projected in the most vivid way possible. Victoria could no longer continue faking her faint. She jumped up, pale and trembling from head to toe. Derek could barely stand. He staggered back a few steps and, pointing at the screen, stammered desperately. No, it's not true. It's edited. It's a setup. Someone is framing us. But his weak words couldn't silence the crowd's anger. Disgusting. What a pair of cheaters. How could you do this to your own wife? Shame on both of you. Insults erupted from everywhere in the room. And I still sat in the front row. Tears began to flow again. This time, it wasn't an act. They were tears of pain from having to relive that scene and hear those poisonous words again in front of so many people. I covered my face with my hands. My shoulders shook with genuine sobs. But then something I never expected happened. On the platform, Ethan looked at me, and a flash of compassion crossed his eyes. But it was quickly replaced by cold determination. He approached and took the microphone firmly in his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said loudly. His voice had an invisible force that instantly silenced the chaotic hall. "Did everyone see that? This is the true face of the woman I was going to marry, and the man I once considered my brother-in-law, part of my own family." He turned toward Derek and Victoria. His gaze was like two sharp knives. "Do you two have anything else to say? Or would you like me to show everyone something even more interesting?" Derek and Victoria, desperate, could only shake their heads. They were completely cornered with no way to excuse themselves. The evidence was right there on the screen. Their own voices, their own words. "But all this," Ethan continued, and his voice became even more mysterious and terrifying, "doesn't end here. This drama of infidelity is actually just the tip of a much larger iceberg." The entire hall fell silent again. Everyone wondered what the groom could possibly mean. How could this get any worse? Ethan pulled a bundle of documents from inside his jacket and held them up for everyone to see. What they really wanted wasn't love. It wasn't even each other. It was this. What was that bundle of documents? And what connection did it have to the conspiracy my brother had uncovered? All eyes were fixed on the papers in his hand, waiting for an even more terrible truth to be revealed. "Before I tell you what this is," Ethan said in a slow, clear voice, "I'd like to tell you a short story. The story of a greedy wolf who used two foxes to break into a chicken coop." He scanned the hall with his gaze, casting a piercing look at some of the guests seated in the VIP section. I noticed a well-dressed man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive watch suddenly tense up. He coughed lightly and adjusted his collar. "The wolf," Ethan continued, "knew the chicken coop was very well protected, so he didn't dare act alone. That's why he found two foxes, a male fox and a female fox. He promised them a life of luxury, all the money they could ever want. They just had to help him carry out a simple plan." My brother paused and looked directly at Victoria. The female fox had the mission of seducing the farmer's son, the future owner of the farm, to marry him and officially become part of the family. Then he turned to Derek. The male fox had the mission of courting the farmer's daughter, a trusting, kind-hearted woman, to become part of the family from another angle. Hearing this, I no longer needed to act. Tears streamed down my face for real. My brother's metaphorical story was like another knife twisting in my pain. I was that trusting, kind-hearted woman, the naive target. Their ultimate goal, Ethan's voice became even colder, was that after gaining everyone's trust, they would slowly unlock the doors and break down the fences, so that the old wolf outside could quietly enter and seize the entire farm. Everything the farmer's family had worked generations to build. He looked directly at Derek and Victoria. Does this story sound familiar to you too? Derek and Victoria couldn't say anything. They only lowered their heads in shame and fear. And this, Ethan raised the bundle of documents. This is the detailed plan and the blueprint that the old wolf drew for the two foxes, the map that tells them exactly which path to take and where to break the fence. This is the complete plan to take over Holloway Construction, the company my parents built with their own hands, the legacy they left for their children. He flipped through the documents one by one, projecting their content directly onto the large screens. Figures, charts, dirty corporate strategies, emails discussing how to drain company accounts, how to forge signatures, how to create fake invoices. Their plan wasn't limited to just stealing contracts. It included creating false scandals, undermining Ethan's credibility with clients, fostering divisions among our employees, all to finally create the conditions for a competitor to acquire Holloway Construction at a fraction of its value. And the name of that competing company was written clearly at the top of several documents: Weston Development Group. The entire hall murmured again. Weston Development Group was not an unknown name in Charleston. It was an aggressive company that had risen quickly in recent years with bold and often controversial tactics. They had a reputation for hostile takeovers. And the man with the silver hair, who had displayed strange behavior earlier, was none other than the president of Weston Development Group, Mr. Richard Weston himself. Now all eyes turned toward him. Mr. Weston went pale, but he tried to maintain his composure. He stood up, straightened his expensive jacket, and tried to casually walk toward the exit. "Mr. Weston, where are you going in such a hurry?" Ethan's voice was like an invisible rope that stopped him in his tracks. "The best part is yet to come. You wouldn't want to miss it." Mr. Weston turned around and forced an awkward business smile. "Mr. Holloway, I believe there's been some kind of misunderstanding. I'm just a guest here. I have nothing to do with your company's internal affairs." "Nothing to do with it," Ethan laughed coldly. "Then how do you explain your secret meetings with these two people over the past several months? How do you explain the money you sent Miss Lane so she could pretend to be from a wealthy family? How do you explain the promise of a senior position to Mr. Mitchell if everything went according to plan?" Every question from Ethan was a powerful blow that left Mr. Weston barely able to stand. He knew my brother wasn't making accusations without proof. Ethan had everything documented. Just then, two men in plain clothes who had been quietly standing near the back of the room slowly approached Mr. Weston's position. They said nothing. They only stared at him with solemn, official eyes. Mr. Weston realized that all his escape routes were blocked. He slumped back into his chair, his forehead soaked in sweat. The performance he had meticulously constructed was crumbling apart. The old wolf had finally been cornered. I, sitting below, watched everything unfold. My heart was no longer filled with just personal pain. Now it burned with anger at the vileness and cruelty of the business world. For profit, they were capable of trampling everything: love, family, even basic human decency. My husband, Derek, whom I once loved with all my heart, was nothing more than a pawn on someone else's chessboard. He had sold his soul for a vain promise of money and power. He looked at me from the platform, and in his eyes there was no longer boldness or arrogance, just emptiness and extreme despair. He had lost everything: love, honor, his future as well. On the platform, Ethan, after exposing the entire conspiracy, turned toward me. He walked in my direction without saying anything and silently extended his hand. I took his hand and we went up to the platform together. He took the microphone and his voice was no longer sharp. It softened with a touch of compassion. "Ladies and gentlemen, the person most hurt in this story is not me. It's my sister, Megan. This woman has had to endure the deception and betrayal of the man she deeply loved. The man she trusted with her whole heart. She is completely innocent in all of this. He turned toward me and with a look full of love said, Megan, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to go through this. I should have told you sooner. I should have protected you better. I just shook my head. The tears flowed again, but this time they were tears of emotion and gratitude. My brother had been carrying this burden alone all these months, protecting me even while planning his counterattack. Today's wedding, Ethan continued, addressing the crowd, will obviously not have a bride, but the party will continue. I hope all our distinguished guests stay and consider this a celebration of the truth, of justice finally being served. The entire hall erupted in applause. They weren't applauding for a wedding. They were applauding for the courage and the victory of honesty over deception. But then something unexpected happened. When I thought everything was finally over, a sharp scream erupted from Victoria, who was still standing on the platform. She jumped forward, grabbed a sharp letter opener from the signing table, and with a crazed look in her eyes, lunged directly at me. It's your fault. Everything is your fault. If you hadn't existed, everything would have worked out perfectly. Victoria's crazed action was so fast and sudden that it stunned everyone. The letter opener, gleaming under the bright lights, flew toward me like a blade of pure hatred. I froze. My mind went blank. I realized the imminent danger, but I couldn't move my body to react. Ethan, beside me, also didn't have time to intervene. He was too far away. When the tip of the blade was just inches from my chest, a shadow darted out from behind like lightning. It was none other than Derek, my husband. He put his entire body in front of me. The sharp edge of the letter opener slashed across his forearm, leaving a deep cut. Blood immediately started soaking through his sleeve. Derek cried out in pain, staggering backward and clutching his arm. Victoria seemed shocked by her own action, and even more shocked by Derek's reaction. She dropped the letter opener and stood there dazed, her face pale with disbelief. It was then that the venue security guards rushed over to restrain her. They grabbed her arms and pulled her away from the platform. She was screaming and crying, completely unhinged. The hall plunged into chaos again. Guests were standing up. Some were rushing toward the exits. Others were crowding forward to see what happened. Ethan ran to help Derek. Are you okay? Someone call an ambulance. Derek, his face contorted with pain, shook his head. He didn't look at Ethan. He looked at me. His gaze was very complex. There was regret, pain, and somehow a kind of relief. Megan, are you okay? He asked weakly. I looked at the blood dripping from his arm. My heart was filled with mixed emotions. Why had he done it? How could the man who had mercilessly deceived and used me risk his own safety to protect me? Was this genuine? Or was this another performance? An attempt to gain my last ounce of compassion? Take him to get medical attention immediately, Ethan ordered the venue staff. As Derek was being led away by two attendants, the two plainclothes officers also approached Mr. Weston. The president of Weston Development Group no longer looked imposing. He was just a defeated old man, walking with his head bowed amid people's accusations and contempt. His expensive suit couldn't hide his shame. The wedding farce had finally come to an end. Ethan took the microphone again and tried to calm the remaining guests. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I apologize for this unexpected turn of events. Our celebration will have to end here. On behalf of my family, I sincerely thank you all for your attendance and for witnessing the truth today. The guests began to leave one by one. Many stopped to shake Ethan's hand, to express their admiration for his composure and his brilliant execution. They would take this story with them, an unforgettable tale they would tell for years. What had been a splendid wedding hall now looked desolate and cold, like a battlefield after the war. Flower petals scattered across the floor, chairs overturned, the giant cake untouched. Ethan and I stood in the empty space in silence. Extreme exhaustion washed over both of us. The adrenaline was fatting. The reality was setting in. It's all over, Megan. Ethan gave me a gentle pat on the shoulder. I nodded, but a big question still lingered in my mind. Brother, how did you know everything? The company takeover plan, Mr. Weston's involvement. How did you figure it all out? Ethan looked at me and gave a sad smile. Because I wasn't the only one who wanted to expose him. My brother told me another story, a story that had been hidden for years. Before Dad passed away, Ethan began, he was a close friend and business partner of Richard Weston. They started out together, worked on the same job sites when they were young. But over time, Weston became greedy. He wanted everything for himself. I listened intently. This was something I had never known. It was Weston who sabotaged several of Dad's early projects, Ethan continued. He spread rumors, stole clients, did everything he could to undermine our family business. Dad suspected him, but he could never prove it. The stress and disappointment took a toll on his health, and eventually... Ethan's voice trailed off. We both knew how the story ended. Our father's heart attack. The sudden loss that shattered our world. I always had my suspicions about the circumstances around Dad's decline, Ethan said, his voice heavy. After I took over the company, I began to investigate in secret. Little by little, I found evidence of Weston's dirty tactics over the years. But he was too cunning. He cleverly hid all the traces. I never had enough proof to expose him. Until Victoria appeared, I said softly. Ethan nodded. At first, I was also fooled by her innocent appearance. She was beautiful, charming, said all the right things. But I started noticing too many coincidences. She always casually mentioned projects that Weston Development was competing with us on. She asked too many questions about our bidding strategies. He sighed deeply. So I had her investigated, and I discovered the connection between her and Weston. She was his niece's college roommate. They had known each other for years. That's when I realized he was trying to repeat the same destructive playbook, using my own wedding as a weapon against me, and I decided this was my opportunity to finally get justice for our father. Hearing this, I felt a knot in my chest. Behind the company's success, my brother had carried such a heavy burden of vengeance. He had to live a lie, act with the woman he was supposedly going to marry, waiting for the day he could take down our family's enemy. Then everything was part of your plan, I said. Most of it, yes, Ethan nodded. Except for one thing, I didn't know your husband was also part of his scheme. I didn't know Derek had been planted in our family years ago. That hit me hard, Megan. To know that while I was focused on Victoria, another snake was already inside our house, sleeping beside my own sister. His voice cracked slightly. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from that. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. It's not your fault, I said, squeezing his hand. You did everything you could. Your appearance today, Ethan continued, your discovery of the truth at that moment, it became the unexpected variable, the decisive blow that made them fall without having time to react. My brother looked at me with pride. My little sister, you've truly grown up. You're stronger than you know. I managed a smile through my tears. We had one together. As siblings, as family, we had one. A little later, a venue staff member came to inform us that Derek had received first aid. The wound required stitches, but it wasn't life-threatening. He would need to go to the hospital for proper treatment. But before leaving, he had requested to speak with me, just for a moment. I hesitated. Part of me never wanted to see his face again, but another part of me wanted answers. I wanted to know if there was any sincerity left in him, any truth at all in our 4 years together. Finally, I nodded. I'll talk to him. I entered the small room where Derek was being treated. He was sitting on a chair with his arm heavily bandaged. He looked disheveled. His expensive suit was wrinkled and stained with blood. His face lacked all vitality. The confident, charming man I had married was gone. In his place was someone broken. Seeing me enter, he lifted his head. His eyes were full of guilt. I'm sorry, Megan. What good is an apology now? I asked coldly. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said, lowering his head. I just wanted to tell you one thing. The moment I jumped to protect you, that was real. It wasn't an act. That was the first honest thing I've done in years. I looked at him in silence, waiting. For the past 4 years, he continued in a hoarse voice, I've lived a lie. I approached you because of Weston's plan, for the money, for the connections. It was supposed to be just business. He paused, struggling to find words. But then, something changed. I started feeling something real for you. Your kindness, your warmth, the way you believed in me when no one else did. It moved my heart in ways I didn't expect. But I was already too deep into the plan. I couldn't turn back. I wanted you, and I also wanted the money and the status. Greed clouded my judgment. He looked up at me, and tears began to well up in his eyes. Today, when I saw that blade coming toward you, I realized the only thing I truly wanted to protect was you. But it's already too late for everything. I destroyed it all with my own hands. I listened to his late confession, but I felt no emotion stirring in my heart anymore. Love. Perhaps there had been some genuine moments, but the betrayal and the damage he caused had killed whatever love existed. Save those words for the judge, I said in an expressionless voice. Between us, everything is over. I turned around and walked toward the door. Megan, he called out weakly. I paused but didn't turn back. I hope someday you find someone who deserves you, someone better than me, someone who will love you the way you should be loved. I said nothing. I opened the door and stepped out. The moment that door closed behind me, the door to my 4 years of marriage officially closed forever too. A week after the stormy wedding, everything began to gradually calm down, but the aftermath was still enormous. The case of Weston Development Group became a scandal that shook the Charleston business community. Mr. Richard Weston, Victoria Lane, and several other executives were arrested and investigated for fraud, conspiracy, and corporate espionage. The evidence my brother had gathered was overwhelming. Bank records, emails, recorded conversations. There was no way for them to escape. Despite his act of protecting me, Derek couldn't escape his involvement either. As a key piece of the conspiracy, he was summoned to testify and faced the inevitable consequences of his choices. I filed for divorce immediately. The entire process was carried out quickly and without dispute. Derek signed everything without resistance. We decided to sell our house, the only valuable common asset we had. I didn't want to keep anything that reminded me of a past full of lies. After everything was legally resolved, I felt I needed time for myself, time to heal, time to figure out who I was without the shadow of betrayal hanging over me. I decided to take a trip alone, go somewhere far away to clear my mind and start fresh. I chose a small coastal town in California, a place of calm, quiet enough to heal my wounds. During my weeks there, I didn't do much. I simply spent my time walking along the beach at sunrise, sitting in small seaside cafes, reading books I had always wanted to read but never had time for, writing in a journal, processing everything that had happened. After so many storms, I realized that what I truly needed wasn't revenge or closure. It was peace of mind. And one cool afternoon, while I was sitting in a rustic cafe overlooking the Pacific Ocean, sketching ideas for a small business I had been dreaming about, a familiar voice sounded next to me. Hello, what a small world. I looked up and was surprised. It was one of the plainclothes officers who had been at the wedding that day, the one who had helped escort Mr. Weston out. His sudden appearance caught me completely off guard. He was no longer wearing his formal attire. Instead, he had on a casual blue button-down shirt and khaki pants. He looked much younger and more approachable without the stern professional demeanor. The afternoon California breeze gently ruffled his dark brown hair. Hello, I smiled, trying to hide my surprise. What a coincidence to find you here. Are you on vacation? You could say that, he replied. A gentle smile revealed a slight dimple in his cheek. I just transferred to a position out here actually. Needed a change of scenery. You could say I'm starting a new chapter. He glanced at my notebook and pen. Looks like you're working on something. Sorry to interrupt. No, I was just finishing up anyway. I hurried to close the notebook. Then he hesitated slightly. Would you mind if I sit here for a moment? The cafe is pretty crowded, and this seems like the only available spot. I looked around, and indeed, the small, charming cafe was filled with tourists and locals enjoying the beautiful weather. Of course, please sit down. He pulled up a chair and sat across from me, ordering a black coffee. There was a slightly awkward silence between us at first. I didn't know what to say, and he also seemed to be searching for the right words. At the wedding that day, he finally broke the silence. I saw everything that happened. You handled yourself with incredible grace. Given what you went through, you were very brave. His words surprised me. I thought he had only been there in an official capacity. I didn't realize he had noticed anything else. Thank you. Fortunately, it's all in the past now. I'm Nathan, he introduced himself, extending his hand. Nathan Cole. Megan, I replied, shaking his hand. Megan Holloway. Nice to properly meet you, Nathan. And just like that, we started talking. At first, it was just light conversation. About California, about the best hiking trails nearby, about our favorite books. But little by little, the conversation became deeper. Nathan told me why he had requested the transfer. After years of working high-stress cases in the city, he felt burnt out. He wanted to live and work somewhere quieter, somewhere he could breathe. He loved the ocean, the mountains, the simple life. I also shared parts of my story, not the painful details of the betrayal, but my decision to leave Charleston for a while, my desire to find a new balance in life, my dreams of maybe starting my own small business someday. We realized we had something profound in common. We were both on a journey to find a new beginning, both trying to rebuild from the wreckage of our past. Nathan was a very engaging person to talk to. He was intelligent and genuinely funny, but there was something quiet and deep in his eyes, something characteristic of someone who has seen a lot of darkness and chosen to walk toward light anyway. Talking to him made me feel comfortable, safe, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a very long time. The sky began to darken. The warm golden lights of the cafe came on, creating a cozy atmosphere. The sound of waves crashing in the distance provided a gentle soundtrack. I didn't know how long we had been talking. Hours had slipped by like minutes. It's getting late, Nathan said, glancing at his watch. I should probably head out early morning tomorrow. He paused. But it's been really nice talking with you, Megan, really nice. Likewise, I smiled genuinely. Actually, he hesitated, then seemed to gather courage. This weekend, I'm planning to check out this trail along the cliffs, supposed to have amazing sunset views, and I was wondering, if you're not busy, would you maybe want to come? His invitation made my heart skip unexpectedly. Hiking, I laughed softly. I've never really done much of that. All the more reason you should try it. He smiled warmly. The fresh air, the views, it helps clear the mind like nothing else. I thought about it for a moment. Something about this felt right. Something about him felt right. Then I nodded. Yes, I'd love to. After that casual encounter, Nathan and I had our first real date that weekend. We hiked along the coastal cliffs together, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The view was breathtaking, but what I remember most wasn't the scenery. It was how easy everything felt with him. We wandered through farmers' markets on lazy Sunday mornings, discovered hidden restaurants tucked away in quiet neighborhoods, sat on the beach at night, talking about everything and nothing until the stars came out. With Nathan by my side, I was no longer the woman who had to be constantly on guard, the one who had to distrust everyone and analyze every word for hidden meanings. He gave me a strange sense of security and peace that I had forgotten existed. He didn't ask me about the details of my past. He didn't make me relive painful memories or explain my scars. He simply stayed by my side, patient, present, sharing the small joys of life with me, letting me heal at my own pace. The feelings between us grew naturally and smoothly, like a flower blooming in spring. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people finding comfort in each other's presence. But I had no idea that the best was yet to come. One night, about 2 months after we met, we were sitting on a quiet stretch of beach. The moon was full and bright, reflecting off the gentle waves. The sound of the ocean was soothing, peaceful. Nathan suddenly reached over and took my hand in his. His touch was warm and gentle. "Megan," his voice was deep and sincere. "I know you've been through a lot. I know trust doesn't come easy for you anymore, and I completely understand that." I looked at him, my heart beating a little faster. "I don't want to rush anything," he continued. "I don't want to pressure you. I just want to tell you that if you ever decide to let someone in again, I'd like to be that person. I'd like to be the one who helps you write a new chapter, a chapter full of honesty and happiness." I looked into his sincere eyes. There was no hidden agenda there, no calculation, no manipulation, just genuine warmth and care. The tears flowed again, but this time they were tears of hope, of possibility, of allowing myself to believe that good things could still happen. I didn't say anything elaborate. I simply nodded and squeezed his hand tightly. That was enough. That was everything. But something happened that almost destroyed this beautiful new beginning. About a week later, I received an unexpected visitor at my rental cottage. It was Derek's mother, Mrs. Patricia Mitchell. I hadn't seen her since before the wedding disaster. She was a formidable woman, old money, old values, and apparently old grudges. She showed up unannounced, dressed impeccably as always, with a look of cold determination on her face. "Megan," she said, not bothering with pleasantries, "we need to talk about my son." I was taken aback, but let her in. Part of me was curious about what she could possibly have to say. "Derek is facing serious charges because of your family," she continued, sitting down without being invited. "His career is ruined, his reputation is destroyed, and I believe you owe it to him to help." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I owe him? Mrs. Mitchell, your son deceived me for 4 years. He used our marriage as part of a conspiracy to destroy my family's business. He betrayed me in the worst possible way." "He made mistakes," she admitted, though her tone suggested she didn't really believe it. "But he also saved your life. He threw himself in front of that blade for you. Doesn't that count for anything?" I felt the old pain stirring, the confusion, the mixed emotions I had worked so hard to process. "What exactly do you want from me?" I asked. "I want you to speak on his behalf at his hearing. Tell them he's not a bad person, that he was manipulated by Weston, that he deserves leniency." For a moment, I actually considered it. Despite everything, Derek had protected me in that final moment. Maybe there was some good left in him. Maybe. No. I stopped myself. I recognized what was happening. I was falling into the same trap I had been in for years, making excuses for someone who had hurt me, trying to see the best in someone who had shown me their worst. "Mrs. Mitchell," I said firmly, "your son made his choices, every single one of them. He chose to deceive me. He chose to participate in the conspiracy. He chose greed over integrity. The only good choice he made was in that final moment, and I'm grateful for it, but it doesn't erase everything else." I stood up, signaling that this conversation was over. "I won't speak against him at the hearing, but I won't speak for him either. He needs to face the consequences of his own actions. That's the only way he'll ever truly change." Mrs. Mitchell's face hardened. "You'll regret this, Megan. The Mitchells have long memories." "Then remember this," I replied calmly. "I'm not the naive woman your son married anymore. I've learned to protect myself, and I have people who will stand by me." She left without another word, but her visit shook me more than I wanted to admit. That night, I told Nathan everything. About the visit, about my conflicted feelings, about my fear that maybe I was being too harsh, or maybe not harsh enough. Nathan listened quietly until I finished. Then he took both my hands in his. "Megan, you've spent years putting other people's needs before your own, giving second chances to people who didn't deserve them, doubting your own judgment because someone made you feel like you weren't enough." He looked at me with those steady, honest eyes. "But you are enough. Your feelings are valid. Your boundaries matter. And anyone who tries to manipulate you into abandoning them doesn't have your best interests at heart." His words were exactly what I needed to hear, not because he was telling me what to do, but because he was reminding me that I already knew the right answer. I just needed permission to trust myself. I hugged him tightly. Thank you for listening, for understanding, for not trying to fix me. You don't need fixing, he said softly. You just need someone who sees you, really sees you, and I do. That night, I realized something important. This was what real love felt like. Not grand gestures or pretty words, but quiet support, unwavering presence. Someone who helped you become the best version of yourself instead of making you smaller. The months that followed were the most peaceful of my life. My brother Ethan called regularly with updates from Charleston. Holloway construction was thriving now that the shadow of Weston's sabotage had been lifted. Ethan had implemented new security measures and had even expanded into neighboring states. He also shared news about the legal proceedings. Mr. Richard Weston was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. His company was dissolved, its assets liquidated to pay restitution to his victims. The empire he had built on deception and destruction crumbled completely. Victoria Lane received a 5-year sentence for her role in the conspiracy. I heard she had a complete breakdown during the trial. The glamorous mask she had worn for so long finally shattered, revealing the desperate, empty person underneath. And Derek, my ex-husband, received a 3-year sentence, reduced slightly because of his cooperation with investigators and his act of protecting me. His mother's attempts to use family influence had failed. The evidence was simply too overwhelming. I felt no satisfaction hearing about their fates, no joy in their suffering, just a quiet sense of closure. Justice had been served, not through revenge but through truth. Sometimes that's enough. 1 year after the wedding that changed everything, Nathan and I stood on the same beach where we had our first real conversation. The same beach where he had asked to be part of my new chapter. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. The waves rolled gently onto the shore. It was perfect. Nathan turned to me, and I noticed he seemed nervous, which was unusual for him. He was always so calm and composed. Megan, he said, his voice slightly shaky, this past year with you has been the happiest of my life. You've taught me what it means to truly connect with someone, to build something real and honest. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart stopped. I know you've been hurt before. I know trust doesn't come easy, and I promise you I will spend every day earning that trust, proving that I'm worthy of it. He opened the box, revealing a beautiful but simple ring, an elegant band with a single diamond that caught the last rays of sunlight. Megan Holloway, will you marry me? Tears streamed down my face. Happy tears, healing tears, the tears of a woman who had finally found her way home. Yes, I whispered, then louder. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger and pulled me into his arms. We stood there, wrapped in each other's embrace, as the sun disappeared below the horizon. A perfect ending to one chapter, a perfect beginning to another. Our wedding was nothing like the grand Charleston affair that had turned into a disaster. It was small, intimate, held on that same beach at sunset with only our closest loved ones present. Ethan walked me down the sandy aisle, his eyes shining with tears he was trying not to shed. My strong, protective brother who had always been there for me, who had fought our family's enemies and emerged victorious. Seeing him so emotional made my own tears flow freely. I'm so proud of you, Megan, he whispered as we reached Nathan. Mom and Dad would be too. I hugged him tightly before taking Nathan's hands. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. We wrote our own vows. Nathan promised to always be honest with me, even when the truth was hard. I promised to trust him, to let him in, to build a life together without fear. When we kissed as husband and wife, the small crowd erupted in cheers. It wasn't hundreds of guests like before, just about 20 people who truly loved us, but it felt bigger, more meaningful, more real. At the small reception afterward, I found a quiet moment alone with Ethan. He was standing near the water, watching the waves with a thoughtful expression. Hey, I said, joining him, you okay? He smiled, More than okay. I was just thinking about how far we've come, both of us. It's been quite a journey, I agreed. You know, he said, after everything with Victoria and Weston, I wasn't sure I'd ever trust anyone again. But watching you with Nathan, it gives me hope. I squeezed his arm. You'll find your person, Ethan, someone who deserves all the love you have to give. He nodded. Actually, there's someone. A woman I met through business. She's kind, genuine, nothing like Victoria. Why didn't you tell me? He shrugged, a rare shy smile crossing his face. It's still new. I didn't want to jinx it, but maybe I'll bring her to visit soon. I would love that. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, siblings who had weathered storms together and come out stronger. Thank you, Ethan, I said finally, for everything, for protecting me, for taking care of me after Mom and Dad died, for exposing the truth even when it was hard. I don't know where I'd be without you. He pulled me into a hug. That's what big brothers are for, always have your back, always. 2 years later, life was better than I ever could have imagined. Nathan and I had built a beautiful life in California. We bought a cottage near the ocean, the kind with a wraparound porch where we could watch the sunset every evening. I had finally started my own business, a small boutique interior design firm that was growing steadily. Nathan had advanced in his career and was genuinely happy with his work for the first time in years. And then came the greatest blessing of all. Our daughter, Emma Rose Cole, arrived on a perfect spring morning. She had her father's dark hair and my eyes. From the moment I held her in my arms, I knew that every painful thing I had endured was worth it, because it all led me here, to this moment, to this family. Ethan visited often, sometimes with his girlfriend, sometimes alone. His relationship was blossoming into something serious, and I could see the old lightness returning to his eyes. The burden of revenge and protection was finally lifting from his shoulders. Holloway Construction continued to thrive. Ethan had transformed it into a company known not just for quality work, but for integrity and ethical practices. Our parents would have been so proud. One afternoon, while Emma was napping and Nathan was at work, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Derek, from prison. I almost threw it away without reading it, but something made me pause. Maybe it was closure I was seeking. Maybe just curiosity. I opened it. Dear Megan, I don't expect you to read this. I wouldn't blame you if you tore it up the moment you saw my name. But on the small chance that you do read it, there are things I need to say. I'm sorry. I know those words mean nothing after what I did, but I need you to know that they're true. In prison, I've had a lot of time to think, to really examine the person I became and the choices I made. I was so consumed by greed and ambition that I lost sight of everything that actually mattered, including you. The years we spent together weren't all lies, Megan. I know you probably don't believe that, and I don't blame you. But there were moments when I saw the real you, the kind, trusting, beautiful person you are, and I felt things I had never felt before. Real things. I just didn't know what to do with them. I had already made my deal with the devil, and I thought there was no turning back. I'm not writing this to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm writing because you deserve to know that you were never the fool in our story. I was. You loved honestly and openly, and that's not a weakness. It's the bravest thing a person can do. I heard through my mother that you've remarried, that you have a daughter now. I'm happy for you, Megan, genuinely happy. You deserve every bit of joy that comes your way. I have 2 more years left on my sentence. When I get out, I'm going to try to become someone better. Someone my own mother won't have to make excuses for. I don't know if I'll succeed, but I'm going to try. Thank you for being the one good thing in my broken life, even if I was too stupid to appreciate it. Derek. I sat with the letter for a long time after reading it. The anger I expected to feel didn't come. Neither did the pain, just a strange sense of peace. I didn't write back. There was nothing left to say, but I did take the letter and place it in a box with other remnants of my past, not to hold on to the pain, but to remember how far I had come. That evening, when Nathan came home, I was sitting on our porch with Emma in my arms. He joined us, wrapping his arm around my shoulders and kissing the top of my head. "Good day," he asked. "The best," I replied. And I meant it. Because sitting there, with my husband beside me and my daughter in my arms, watching the sun set over the Pacific Ocean, I realized something profound. Every storm I had weathered, every betrayal I had survived, every tear I had shed, it had all led me here, to this moment, to this life, to this love. The naive woman who walked into her brother's wedding that day, expecting nothing but happiness, had been shattered. But from the pieces, someone new had emerged, someone stronger, wiser, more resilient. Someone who knew that real love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect appearances. It was about choosing each other every single day, about honesty, even when it hurt, about supporting each other through the darkness and celebrating together in the light. I looked at Nathan, and he looked at me. No words were needed. We understood each other completely. Behind us, inside our cozy cottage, the phone rang. It was probably Ethan, calling to confirm his visit next weekend with his girlfriend. He had hinted that he might have big news to share. I suspected a proposal was coming. Emma stirred in my arms, making the tiny sounds that always melted my heart. She was everything good and pure in this world. A fresh start, a new chapter, a reason to believe in tomorrow. The sky turned from gold to pink to deep purple as the sun disappeared below the horizon. Another day ending. Another day of blessings counted. Nathan squeezed my hand. "I love you, Megan Cole." "I love you too," I whispered back, "more than you'll ever know." We sat there in perfect peace, a family born from the ashes of betrayal, thriving in the warmth of true love. Life, I had learned, was not about avoiding the storms. It was about learning to dance in the rain, about finding the people who would hold umbrellas over your head and stand beside you until the clouds parted. I had found those people, my brother, my husband, my daughter, my family. And looking back at everything I had been through, I wouldn't change a single moment. Because every twist of fate, every broken heart, every shattered illusion had led me exactly where I was meant to be. Home. The wedding that was supposed to destroy me had set me free instead. The betrayal that should have broken me had made me whole. And the love I thought I had lost forever, it had been waiting for me all along, just around the corner, just beyond the storm. Emma yawned and snuggled closer to my chest. Nathan pressed a kiss to my temple. Somewhere inside, the phone stopped ringing and went to voicemail. Ethan would call back tomorrow. There was no rush. We had all the time in the world. Because finally, after all the pain and all the healing, after all the storms and all the rainbows, I had found my happily ever after. And we lived it together, every single day, with open hearts and honest love. With a family that would never let me fall. With a smile that came from the deepest part of my soul. I was home, I was loved, I was happy. And that was everything. The end. Thank you for reading the complete story. I hope you enjoyed this emotional journey of betrayal, resilience, and finding true love after heartbreak. If you'd like me to write another story in a similar style, just let me know.